And the Prime Minister's focus was not just on the Delhi voter, but important constituencies within the state of Delhi. Of course, the primary objective was to blunt the opposition's attack led by Rahul Gandhi yesterday. But beyond that, this was an election pitch. This was a speech aimed very particularly at voters in Delhi also. And let me elaborate. He talked about issues that have only come up in the Delhi election. So he's talked about Kejriwal without naming him, and he's referred to the attempt by Rahul Gandhi to try and once again wean away the backward classes from the overarching rainbow confluence of the BJP. So you had the Delhi voter, the backward classes, women, very important constituency in Delhi. Kejriwal, in fact, has come out and said that his party could get a clear mandate, a very easy majority if the women voter still stuck by him. So he's made it a mission, Prime Minister that is, in this speech, and he referred to Mahila, the word Mahila, whether talking in the context of the president's image and her self-respect, and beyond that, minority women and several schemes that his government has floated to basically make lives of women easier in this country, give them dignity and agency. Both things he highlighted in great detail. He also then looked at the larger middle class focus areas, which is the issues of constitutionalism, for instance, and parliamentary practice. So he said that, look, as far as I am concerned, our government is concerned, we put the constitution far above anyone else in this country, and we are directed by it. In fact, every move we make is informed by it, and also, of course, the absolute influence of Dr. Ambedkar, whose views have obviously been channelized through the Constitution. And he listed several examples. One or two he talked about, and again this time taking a little dig at Rahul Gandhi, making him perhaps feel a little smaller. He said that, look, there was a time in 2014 when we were given a mandate where the opposition was so decimated that none of them even qualified to be called under the Constitution an opposition party. They just didn't meet the criteria. The rules were such that they wouldn't meet the criteria of being the official opposition. But we nevertheless set aside the rules, put the spirit of the Constitution center forth, and we appointed de facto LOP and included that LOP, obviously talking about Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary there, in most of the meetings that had anything to do with policy making, especially appointments of key constitutional post holders, which was mandated, of course, by the Constitution. So we even respected the Constitution in spirit, forget about letter, in spirit, even when the letter didn't dictate it. So those were some of the examples he used. And of course, then he talked about the farmers, where he focused a lot on this mantra that he has sort of evolved over the years, which is called Santushtikaran, as opposed to Tushtikaran. He says that most of the opposition only believes in selectively picking or cherry picking who they want to benefit because it is a convenient fit with their vote bank. But I don't do that. I believe in 100% saturation model. I believe in satisfaction, Santushtikaran. So these were some of the highlights of his speech. I think this was a very well worked. And it didn't have the provocations that perhaps his speech had in the last session, but he was very clever in articulating his political message in the context of the Delhi election and hitting a couple of targets, I think, with a certain definitiveness.
Right. Aman, what about you? I mean, of course, that entire aspect where the Prime Minister talks about how the democratic process of the country has never been undermined under the BJP or the NDA regime was something that he'd said right at the onset, right at the start of the speech. And that speech really, talking and taking into account each and everything that the Prime Minister really wanted to say, very comprehensive for that matter. What was your takeaway?
Yes, that was what we were discussing when the PM was speaking, that always Prime Minister Modi's speech are very meticulous. He covers nearly every ground and, it's a mixture of policy and politics. I would say, picking up from what Rahul was saying, I think he's very strongly attacked what have been the attacks coming from the Congress party in the last few days, like saying that Rahul Gandhi's comment, which came a few days back, that he's fighting against the Indian state, Mr. Modi saying this is almost an urban Naxal language, which this country, will never tolerate. This country is about unity, and such language should best be avoided by somebody who's the LOP. I think on the attack on Kejriwal, which PM has been doing during the election campaign, and now significantly this Sheesh Mahal attack coming just a few hours before tomorrow morning Delhi polls. So obviously that is also significant, because he's saying we've saved thousands of crores of rupees through the DBT mechanism, but we don't build our bungalows, while the party has, built a Sheesh Mahal. I would also think very significant is the statement on the woman president of India, Draupadi Murmu, because few days back we saw what Sonia Gandhi had said. The Prime Minister clearly saying that, she's a woman president, she comes from a poor family. Why can't you respect her? What is this disrespectful attitude towards the president of the country? Why demean the position of the Rashtrapati of India? So I think that's also very significant coming from the Prime Minister. He had tweeted about it earlier, but now the Prime Minister saying out on the floor of the House, I think embarrassing the Congress party here, that your words that you chose were not very right and you are disrespecting the president. Provocative, there is one provocation, which Rahul said there is no provocation. I think the Kennedy remark, which he has, said that Rahul Gandhi speaking about foreign policy, and, yesterday what he said about Jai Shankar going to US. The Prime Minister didn't dwell much into that, because Mr. Jai Shankar has already responded. But Prime Minister clearly bringing in this book, and, we have excerpts of that book now, what Mr. Nehru was dealing with Mr. Kennedy. So it's very interesting. I think that's quite provocative. That could raise the political temperature in a day or two, what the Prime Minister has said. Other points about caste, that how the opposition is trying to, Congress is trying to divide people in caste. That has been something the PM has been speaking about earlier also. But I think the larger issue, I think, is the attack on Rahul Gandhi and attack on Arvind Kejriwal.
Right. Let me also now bring in our colleagues Pallavi Ghosh and Arunima, who are now joining us on the broadcast. Also with us is Abhijit Majumdar, senior journalist. Abhijit, let me come to you. Do you agree with the points that my colleagues are making here, the key highlights of the Prime Minister's speech and this provocation that Aman was also talking about? Did you expect that? Did you see that coming from the Prime Minister?
Yeah, because the speech comes just a day, about what, 24 hours before Delhi goes to 12 hours, I guess, before Delhi goes to polls. And, it was bound to be political, but I still feel that the Prime Minister was restrained, but there was jibe after jibe, but in a very restrained tone. He took on, he talked about AAP being Abda. He talked about the Sheesh Mahal and, jacuzzi and, stylish showers in Kejriwal's apartment, which, Sheesh Mahal that everybody is talking about, and the BJP has made it a weapon against the Aam Aadmi Party this elections. Several, and of course, he has taken off on Congress, at several levels, including Rahul Gandhi's, really reckless remark about, fighting the Indian state. From there to, its dynastic politics of having, three MPs simultaneously in parliament from the same family. So yes, it was a very, very strong election speech. He also spoke about the benefits, the schemes that he has been doing. There was a very long list of that he sort of went through. He talked about the income tax, massive income tax bonanza that the budget got for the middle class. He talked about Ayushman Bharat. That is significant because, Aam Aadmi Party is accused of, not allowing that scheme in Delhi. So he spoke about Ayushman Bharat. He brought in the Lancet reference to Ayushman Bharat and, how it's doing so well. So yes, there are very strong undercurrents of election pitch there.
Right.
But he was, there was not much of a polarizing, not much of polarization in that.
Okay.
That I feel is significant. There was not much of
Absolutely. So let me bring in Pallavi here. Pallavi, do you think, as opposed to what the BJP leaders have been claiming of Rahul Gandhi's speech, calling it rather reckless, coming in from a position older that of a leader of opposition, this speech of the Prime Minister really was rather restrained? And even if we look at this political pitch or elections, keeping elections in Delhi in mind, he of course started with talking about the Sheesh Mahal and later also brought in Bihar angle, talking about the Makhana farmers and the exports that India is looking at.
Yeah, I agree with you, Griha. In fact, Rahul Gandhi's speech yesterday was very unusual to character in the sense there was no screeching happening there, and many would call that restraint, but it was considered to be high on philosophy and low of content. And that was a criticism which came in. And also the fact that, he was not factually correct on many parts. And, I think the BJP has tried to structure and attack the Rahul Gandhi as being a kind of a reckless politician. When you are the LOP, because that's a constitutional position you hold, you really have to be doubly sure in the sense that you have to provide and kind of authenticate every claim you make on the floor of the House with hard evidence. Just moments before the Prime Minister was speaking, one of his punch. I think Prime Minister showed that gravitas, I would say, because that's a constitutional position again. And I think he's trying to set that example that you can put your point of view forward, but, it should be hinged on facts. It should be substantiated by facts with hard evidence. And I think he made that point. I mean, he tried to do that. I mean, for example, when Rahul Gandhi made fun of, Make in India being a failure, he talks about the fact that T-shirts se leke mobile phones tak. I don't think it was just off the cuff comment. Rahul Gandhi yesterday had shown his mobile phone. He had also shown his own T-shirt to make the point that all of this is made in China. That's why the Prime Minister made a reference to that very specifically. A very subtle, nuanced way of hitting back at Rahul Gandhi, Griha. I think that was one point which needs to be underscored. And second, every point, whether it comes on foreign policy with that witty jibe and then mentioning Shashi Tharoor, and then talking about the JFK diary crisis, the excerpts of the book, as we are talking about, are already out in the domain. The cartoon he referenced to.
Yes.
Rahul Gandhi often talks about his father's legacy of 21st century. I think that cartoon best capsules what was never happened. That 21st century never happened. He said कि 21st century क्या 20th century का भी आप पूरा नहीं कर पाए. So I think all in all, he showed that gravitas which a prime minister should show, a constitutional position should show. And I think in the days to come, I think that's the lesson which the BJP would want to give out to Rahul Gandhi. You occupy a position, please show that grace of that position and substantiate all your allegations.
And Arunama, very subtly also taking on Rahul Gandhi and in turn the Congress party and opposition for that matter over the demand of caste census, you think?
Yes, the way he said that, cutting across party lines, in the past, the OBC members of parliament have come forward and demanded that the OBC commission be given its constitutional status, and that has not happened. That decision also has been put in place by my government itself. So, that was a key point that he made. He also said about the Rashtrapati, that why can't you respect her? BJP has always said that she's the first tribal woman who's on the president's chair. So we have given that right that is due to the tribal community. So all of that did come in the Prime Minister's speech. But what I found refreshing is that this time around, from both sides, be it the opposition side or be it from the treasury side, the past acrimony and complete lack of respect that we have seen in the past few sessions, this time I think both sides have turned a leaf. Rahul Gandhi, when he ended his speech yesterday, he said that, I thank the Prime Minister for listening to me. At one point, he said that, I know the Prime Minister tried, but he failed. So he was taking political jibes, but making it less acrimonious. Today, the way the Prime Minister also responded, politically, he's really smashed everything that Rahul Gandhi alleged, but then still keeping it within that broad boundary of respect and pointing out that even when the leader of opposition tag was not available to you, I allowed your colleague to come in as far as the Election Commission's position was concerned. That, I think, was a direct rebuttal to what Rahul Gandhi said yesterday, that you have removed the Chief Justice of India. So as an LOP, when I go there for the Election Commissioner selection meeting, it's 2:1. So there were political jibes, but it was a little more civil than what we have seen in the past 5 or 7 sessions.
And Aman and Rahul, do you think there was too much of conjecture on whether or not Rahul Gandhi was actually present the whole time while the Prime Minister was making that address?
No, I think, look, as I said, this was not really a provocative speech that is going to give you those kind of, acerbic headlines. So I think the Prime Minister structured his message very, very carefully to appeal to a broad-based, educated class of Indians in the context of the Delhi election. Therefore, he raised the bar, so to speak. He talked about his government's commitment to constitutionalism, which matters to the middle class of India, to those who live in urban settings, because
Absolutely.
the language of rights, etc., is most amplified in those classes. And I think this has been a considered attempt by the Prime Minister, whether it's the budget announced by Nirmala Sitharaman or this particular speech, to continue that sort of focus on an educated middle class. And therefore, I think that this was a political speech. I agree also with what Abhijit had said. Political
Yes.
speech, less provocative, more political.
Absolutely, and we will continue with that discussion. My colleague Kritsween is now taking over the broadcast, and she, of course, will be talking about further what did the Prime Minister's speech entail. Thank you so much for watching.
A very good evening. You're watching The Right Stand with me, Kritsween Walia. Viewers, Tushtikaran nahi santushtikaran, said the Prime Minister in his reply to the motion of thanks to the President's address while responding to his critics and political rivals. The Prime Minister spoke of his government's achievements and vision for a Viksit Bharat while also puncturing some of the allegations levelled by leader of opposition Rahul Gandhi in his Lok Sabha address last evening. The Prime Minister